issues that are varied all over town. The primary issue, and one reason why we're doing this in the order we're doing it, is to try to wrestle down the issues between the city college areas and the adjacent housing areas and some of the noise and neighborhood disturbance things there. There are other issues that relate to the rest of town, and as we get from today, we'll get feedback from everyone and give council make a recommendation to council and see what kind of direction they want to give us to go further as far as other issues around town and other neighborhoods. So that's where we're at for today. And if I could get Mr. Berron to give us the staff presentation, we'll go from there.
Thank you, Chair Ross and committee members. The item before you is an update to our city noise ordinance. Then I'll briefly go over what the content of this presentation is. Well, I'll give a little bit of background, as you've already done, about what came from the Santa Barbara City College Neighborhood Task Force. I'll go through a few of the substantive changes. There's a few typographical changes as well that we can skip. And then we can talk about what the appropriate next steps are after we've addressed this acute noise issue. So the Santa Barbara City College and the city worked together on a neighborhood task force with a number of interested parties, students and neighbors, regarding the neighborhood conflicts that were going on in around City College. Increasingly, the neighborhood around City College was experiencing adverse conditions, so partying, rude behavior, frustrated community members were identified in that task force, and city staff looked at what some of the issues are that the city could take on in addressing that. And principally, the question that we looked at was, is the city's noise ordinance adequate at addressing the kinds of concerns that we have here? So I have an example of neighbors not getting along on my picture there. I just want to go over briefly what noise is, because I think it's kind of a high-level esoteric thing. Everyone sort of knows it when they hear it, but it's defined as unwanted sound, so there's a value to calling anything noise. The state defines it as 65 A-weighted decibels as in terms of a CEQA environmental threshold. Currently, we define noise as 60 decibels at the property line or 45 decibels inside a residence. That would not change with the with this proposed ordinance amendment. But I wanted to sort of illustrate just what a decibel is and how loud is. On the left, we have sort of the medical definitions of what these noise levels are. In the center, I've got decibels, and then some noises that people might be used to experiencing. It goes all the way down from a watch ticking is 20 decibels, and shotgun blast or aircraft engines at 130 or 140 decibels. Because it's logarithmic, it's not very intuitive, but 60 decibels, that blue line, is our threshold for noise at a property line, and then 45 is inside a residence. So if your neighbor is playing a lot of music and you're trying to sleep at 10 o'clock at night and that music is louder than rainfall, it's the violation of the existing ordinance. So I wanted to go over what the key changes are that are proposed today. They principally come from the Environmental Protection Agency's Model Noise Control Ordinance. This is the standard starting point for most cities in crafting or revising their noise ordinance. We define a noise disturbance and prohibit specific conduct. There are exclusions for certain uses, and there's also the establishment of administrative enforcement. So I'll go over to each of those briefly. Noise disturbance is defined as plainly audible by a person of ordinary sensitivity at a distance of 50 feet. There are some exceptions that relate to noise that's contained within the noise's own property. So you can exceed that 50-foot distance if you're within a single business or entertainment space. The specific conduct section, 9.16.030A, as basically giving examples of what a noise disturbance is, because noise disturbance is itself pretty qualitative, providing some examples that it helps in defining what's enforceable. So the examples that are given are loud televisions or musical instruments from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., any amplified sound, pets or nuisance animals that could make a lot of noise. It's not intended to define all things that create noise, but to provide some specificity. There are exclusions in the proposed ordinance amendment that specifically address activities that are on property owned or leased by local government or an educational institution, or activities that are permitted by a special event permit by any of those agencies. And the intent there is that the city not be put in a condition where it's issuing a citation to itself. If there's problems with any of those uses, there are remedies through our administrative process outside of the noise ordinance. And then we also have a new section on enforcement, defines what violations are. We retain the misdemeanor citation of disturbing the peace, which is discharged through the courts, but we add an administrative fine for noise disturbance. The intent is for this to be a escalating fine, so that if you have repeat violators, it gets more and more expensive as it goes on. The example that we have from the city of San Luis Obispo is the first fine is $350. It escalates to $750 and then $1,000, and $1,000 thereafter. It also changes the language to allow staff enforcement. This gives the police department and the zoning division more flexibility in that it's not limited to police officers. It can be enforced by other department staff, such as the CSOs or SNAP officers, which is a proposed liaison group to patrol the neighborhood areas around City College. We did a bit of outreach starting in summer of last year, trying to get input from members of the public. We had a well-attended workshop and some engagement through our various online outlets. And we also met with some breakout groups, and we found that there's quite a lot more that could be done to this noise ordinance that is not specifically addressed today. So one of the things that we're looking for City Council to provide guidance on is what future steps might be appropriate to address those concerns. Generally, the public comment received so far has been supportive of the changes to the amendment, or changes to the ordinance, excuse me. Though there were certain issues that are not specifically addressed related to special events, parks, and downtown noise that were outside of the scope of addressing the Santa Barbara City College neighborhood issue. So we're trying to move that item forward and look at what our next steps might be for to address those issues. So staff's recommendation is that the ordinance committee review and comment on this proposed ordinance and make a recommendation to City Council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Hotchkiss.
Quick question. Did you say CSOs now can enforce this? And would they be able to enforce the future regulations?
Committee member Hotchkiss, not currently. It's only police officers that can issue a misdemeanor citation. But the administrative fine could be enforced by CSOs that's under this proposed change.
Okay, we'll get into a little bit more of that later, I think. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo.
Thank you for your presentation. So without using a meter, however, is it not subjective what an individual isn't their sensitivity subjective and what they think is a loud noise subjective?
I'll let
Mr.
Mr. Cohen
Cohen.
answer.
We do, Councilmember Murillo, I wouldn't say subjective. I would say that the standards we're moving away from were quantitative, the decibel levels, and what we're moving towards are more qualitative standards. They're not subjective because there is a definition of what a noise disturbance is. And it talks about sound endangering or injuring the safety or health of human beings or animals, annoying or disturbing reasonable persons of normal sensitivities. Those words may be hard to define, but they're there to allow a decision maker, whether that's a judge, jury, or a hearing officer, make a determination whether the complaint was reasonable.
Okay. And then I noticed that neither in our staff report nor in the ordinance language, it didn't mention SNAP or any specifics like that. That you did that on purpose?
Committeemember Murillo, that's correct. We're not. I didn't want to get too much into SNAP because that's really a police department staffing program. Whether or not that exists, that's, if police department elects not to go forward with SNAP, then we still want the ordinance to be valid.
Okay. Well, I'm just bringing that up, and then I had other notes about the subjects that this is not addressing, for instance, Ealing's Park and the Eagle Lodge, but I guess I'll include that in my deliberation afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Brief housekeeping detail. I think I recognize everyone in here, so I skipped over the public comment that had on subject that did not have to do with the agenda item. Is there anybody here that has a public comment that is not related to this noise ordinance today? Did you fill out a speaker slip? Okay. If you would approach, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, council members. I'm Steve Porcel. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Upper East Side. We represent about 260 households. And one issue that's become prominent in the last year or so is RV parking, long-term, overnight. And I know that that's going to be coming to your committee. We kind of thought it was going to be this month, but maybe it is next month. We'll continue to monitor it. We have created a survey, an online survey that is very extensive and has been filled out by many, many homeowners. We will bring that when that's before you. And we then have been working with Officer Gutierrez, who is our beat officer, who's done a fine job in helping to ameliorate some of the problems. But I just wanted to be sure it was on your list and on your radar, and I will be back when it's on your agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the public comment on the subject. And as I call your name, please come up. We have a number of speaker slips. We're limited to 2 minutes. There's a counter you'll see on the dais. And would the next person in line who's on deck also be prepared to come forward, since we do have a few more folks. The first speaker will be, it's either Janet or Bob Brooks, one of the two of you, please, followed by Diana Bottoms. Mr. Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew. My name is Bob Brooks. I'm a business owner in this community. The issue I'd like to address is the backup beepers that many businesses use on their vehicles. Janet, here, has been very active, proactive, talking with business members of this community, such as Marburg and Lash, and some of the more conspicuous backup beeper owners in this beautiful city. The real problem is that the backup beepers that are being used currently are old technology. We call it kind of caveman technology. They are omnidirectional, which means exactly what it says. Basically, a truck is here, the backup beeper is blasting sound in every direction, and that's just not necessary anymore. There's there are lots of new technologies which have actually been incorporated by Marburg. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but a lot of people have, that because of Janet's work, the Marburg trucks, and I mean all the Marburg trucks, have been retrofitted by factory specified and factory authorized and noise ordinance authorized in other cities directional backup beepers, which are called dual frequency devices. These dual frequency devices are actually directional. So if a truck is backing up, the noise goes behind the truck and doesn't go everywhere else. Also, the noise is dual frequency, which means it is broadcast in two different frequencies. It has a different sound than the caveman, blast over your head, beep, beep, beep. It has a very different tone to it. Deaf people can notice exactly where the noise is coming from.
Need to wrap up, please, Mr. Brooks.
Okay, so these issues have been brought up to Andrew, and what we would like is a commitment from Andrew and from the City Council that this backup beeper issue will be included as line item things similar to what the leaf blower ordinances were, which were the big deal the last time this was done.
Right.
So we would like a commitment that this is going to be included in the noise ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brooks. Diana Bottoms, to be followed by Bill Oliphant.
Hi, I'm Diana Bottoms. I simply want to say that I support the ordinance and hope that it goes forward quickly. We've worked long and hard and still are withstanding lots of uncomfortable, unacceptable behavior, noise, particularly on Oceano. I'm a resident there and an owner of an 8-unit building, and it has affected my whole family and me, and I just want to say thank you for everybody's work, and I support it.
Thank you. Bill Oliphant, to be followed by Joe Sullivan.
Hi. I've been with this thing from the start, 2 years. And I'm proud of the work that we've done. And I would just like to urge you people and urge the council is to give the police another tool for their box. Take it out of the way it is now with in the penal code and make it part of municipal code like San Luis Obispo. Makes it much easier. Police don't have to keep coming back, and breaking up parties, and then as soon as they drive away, parties start up again. This way, this has some teeth to it. And if the landlord's included in this, as it is in San Luis Obispo, it gets the job done. So that's basically what I'd like to say.
Mr. Hotchkiss has a question for you.
So you're saying that the proposed ordinance encompasses what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Thank you for your work in San Luis as well. Joe Sullivan, to be followed by Luz Reyes Martin.
I just wanted to voice our support for this from Santa Barbara City College. We really feel that this will go a long way towards controlling the noise in our local community, improving our relationships in the long run, because you reduce the noise, you reduce conflict. And also, we want to reinforce that the SNAP program is very important to us, that we have committed to funding at least 50% of the initial costs of getting that program started, and that it is dependent upon this noise ordinance. They're waiting for this to come through. So we're anxious to see it done. So thank you.
Thank you. Luz Reyes Martin, followed by Lori Marks.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Luz Reyes Martin. I'm the Public Information Officer for Santa Barbara City College. I'm here on behalf of SBCC to express my support and our support for the Neighborhood Task Force, city staff, and the process that got us to this important milestone. SBCC remains committed to working with the community and city staff to implement strategies to address neighborhood concerns and promote neighborhood well-being. And I'll echo Mr. Sullivan's comments about the SNAP program. That's something that's also incredibly important to our surrounding community, and SBCC looks forward to working with city staff on that in the future, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Marks, to be followed by Gwen Stauffer.
Hello, I'm Lori Marks. I live on Loma Alta, now on the west side, and neighbor of City College, affected greatly by this issue, and I want to thank everybody for 2 years of really hard work. I think the ordinance is doing a great job of addressing our concerns, and I urge the council to move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Gwen Stofford, followed by Jean Serber.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Ordinance Committee. We are very grateful to the Santa Barbara City staff and the Ordinance Committee for all that you've been doing to work on revising this ordinance. In the neighborhood, we've also been working. For 2 years, we've been working with you, City College administration, our neighbors who include families and working folks, retirees, and students. And we've been working with numerous landlords in our neighborhood and the police. And in these 2 years, we've learned that there is overwhelming public support for these revisions to the noise ordinance, particularly the basic revision that moves the citation of violation of the ordinance to administrative process with fines. We are aware that the entire community of Santa Barbara is diverse and complex, and that presents a constant challenge in creating policies that work for everyone. The proposed ordinance revisions might not please all of the people. I'm sure that many ordinances don't. But if this ordinance has flaws, imperfections, or omissions, those will be discovered best by putting the ordinance to work. And should that be the case, there is likely to be overwhelming public support to amend the ordinance appropriately. But let's get it started. Let's put it to work, and let's put it to work in the residential areas where we can all expect and we deserve peace, quiet, and a good night's sleep every night. We've worked for 2 years. We've waited for 2 years. It's been unpleasant. We need the ordinance now. Let's get it passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Serber, to be followed by Mark Taylor.
Hello, my name is Jean Serber. I live at 833 Weldon Road. So my bedroom is on Cliff Drive. So I experience on a weekly basis the noise on Cliff Drive at the corner of Loma Alta and Cliff Drive. So according to the graph, it would be about 80 decibels in the middle of the night. Mostly kids shouting in the street. So I have a question about whether this ordinance will apply to students who are not necessarily in a building but out on the street making noise in the middle of the night. And secondly, I want to express a concern about the developer proposal to increase the density of students in that building from 500 to 1,500 students. So I have grave concerns about the noise level that already exists from Thursday night through Saturday night particularly. It's happened this week, and to the increased density that could happen if that proposal for that development goes forward. Thank you. And I thank everyone who's worked on this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Mark Taylor, to be followed by Alexander Faracho.
Chairman Rouse, members of the committee, we just really want to thank you for getting the ordinance this far. We really want to see it get implemented as soon as possible. Everybody has been working, as you heard, for a couple of years, and as I understand it, yelling is part of the ordinance. If somebody is screaming and yelling, that would be covered. So please, let's get this to the council, get it adopted, get it started. City College does have the money to get ahead, so we can get this SNAP program, work with the police department, make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander Faracho, to be followed by B.B. Longstreet.
Good morning, or afternoon rather, to Chair, Council, and staff. My name is Alex Favacho. I'm a delegate of the State Democratic Party appointed by Senator Mayor Doss Williams. I'm also executive board member of the local Sierra Club. But most importantly, I am a resident who's been living here for over 6 years at the same location on Bath Street, just a few doors down from the Eagles Lodge. I come today really just representing myself and my roommates, but also a number of my community, the members in the neighborhood, have been expressing concern over the Eagles Lodge for a number of years now. I'm surprised it took me this long to finally get here and talk about this, but just recently I sent an email to the beat coordinator, who then referred me to Riley Harward. He's a sergeant in the police department. And he gave me some information on the Eagles Lodge that since 2008, they've had 56 disturbances of loud music, 5 disturbances of loud noise, and 23 disturbances for parties. I've been one of the people who has actually called about the police department about the Eagles Lodge, and it feels funny being a 27-year-old complaining about noise. Aside from just some of the noise, every Sunday night through Thursday night, I walk with my girlfriend to her work up the street at a youth crisis center. We walk right past the Eagles Lodge. It's not just noise that's an issue there. We see drug deals going down in the parking lot. There's fights that break out. We see drunk driving leaving from there. And just the other night, we had people urinating outside of the facility in plain view of the site. It's been an issue for the neighborhood for a long time. The first thing is that it's kind of interesting that the zoning allows for such a facility that really it's a nonprofit, but the board members and I've looked at their records, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And they're essentially operating a commercial entity that is making loud music every weekend, especially during the summer.
We'll need you to wrap up.
Yeah. Just want to say that the noise ordinance, I really appreciate that staff is looking into some of the entities that aren't dealing with residentials, but the exclusions do make it seem like they're not going to address entities such as the Eagles Lodge. So I would look into that because our neighbors are very just concerned with this, and we will address this appropriately later. Thank you.
Okay, BB Longstreet to be followed by Brian Smith.
Hi, I'm BB Longstreet, and I served on the SBCC Neighborhood Task Force. I support the noise ordinance. The demographics of the Lower West Side have changed in the last 30 years that I've lived there, and we need the tools to deal with these changes. I support this ordinance because it gives the PD the necessary tools to deal with noise. It decriminalizes it, which is a big issue. No one on the committee wanted to see young people end up with a record by it. It's basically a teaching tool as far as I'm concerned. But it's also a teaching tool for the landlords who are making a great deal of money off the young students and sometimes not managing their buildings properly. So for those reasons, I support it and look forward to having a quieter, more peaceful existence. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Smith to be followed by Fred Sweeney.
First, I just want to thank the members of the Ordinance Committee and the staff for their work on this important issue. I've been down in that area on Thursday to Sunday evenings, and if you haven't, or Saturday evenings, you should certainly check it out. I think the ordinance serves to preserve and protect the safety and integrity of the neighborhoods. It'll assist police officers, CSOs, and other enforcement entities in trying to help protect the neighborhoods. And then I think, most importantly, it is shown to be a proven method to assist and restore the peace and quiet to residential neighborhoods, which once existed until these problems started coming up. So thank you for your work. I really want to indicate my support and the support of many other people I talked to. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Sweeney will be followed by Asaf Demont.
Committee members, Fred Sweeney. I'm here as the president of the Upper East Association, and I just wanted to add into your list of things to think about and may need to tweak the ordinance by the way, which we're very much in favor of you proceeding with. We've dealt with the last couple of years with Earl Warren Showground, and we've attended their board of directors meetings, had written communication, verbal communication about the events that they hold on their site. And one of the challenges that we have as citizens of the city of Santa Barbara is the Earl Warren is a state-owned property. Now, they have taken the steps to hire an engineer to try to meet the decibel requirements at the property line. But one of the challenges of Santa Barbara is that we're backed by mountains. We're backed on, in fact, two sides. The mesa also is a reflectation element. And so, unlike a flat city, say like Santa Maria, we have all these atmospheric conditions. So what happens when they have an event inside the arena, the noise travels up and then moves out. So it might meet their definition of decibels at the property line, but the fact is you can still hear that sound on the Upper East. And we're using our survey tool, just as Steve Forsell shared with you for the RVs. We're using the same tool to allow our members to monitor that and then let us know if it's bothersome. And it is. We're getting quite a few responses to that. And we're not quite sure how to deal with this because it's a state entity, and they pretty much kind of said, we need to do what we need to do. And so please add that into your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Asaf Demont, to be followed by Bob Stout.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Asaf Demont. I'm speaking on behalf of several concerned business owners that operate within the nightlife district or the entertainment district, however it's termed, which is the bars, restaurants, and nightclubs that operate in Lower State. I know that this is more of a citywide initiative in terms of the noise ordinance, but we kind of wanted to pinpoint a little bit. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I don't usually do public speaking. Just specifically about the how the noise ordinance will affect the mixed-use areas in the downtown core. We kind of looked at several different examples in other markets, and we would like to present some of those those solutions that they have found that hopefully can get incorporated into this bill or into this ordinance. I know that we found one in San Francisco where it's called an actual good neighbor policy in the mixed-use areas. We would also like to establish some kind of self-regulatory group that can help mediate in the situation between any residents and any businesses that operate in that area. And finally, we would like to require new developments to at least take account for the existing businesses that are there and the normal noise volume that just happens. That's it. Thank you very much.
Question, Mr. Hoskins,
Quick
please.
question, if I could. You have some specific suggestions for staff?
For staff?
Yeah. In other words, for the ordinance, how it would deal with handle downtown noise?
In terms, I probably need a little more in terms of like.
Well, it sounded like you'd done some research.
Yes.
And elsewhere, there have been effective.
Yeah, there's. I mean, the one thing that we found.
Don't tell me now. I just want to know if you've done that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Stout, to be followed by Tamara Erickson.
Hi, good afternoon. Just to follow up with Asaf, what he was talking about. I own the Wildcat Lounge. I also live on the Mesa, and I want to commend everybody who's done a lot of work on this ordinance as it relates to residential. I'm switching gears and following up with Asaf. As a longtime owner of restaurants and bars downtown, I find that it's very important how council and everyone goes forward with this in terms of how this noise ordinance could relate to our businesses downtown. Years ago, I don't think it was really designated as an entertainment district, but I know in our dance permits, the words used are entertainment district. Obviously, with mixed-use housing, increased urbanization, these issues are going to come up. And I simply want to say that I think that we should be more included and invited. I know there was a public comment, but maybe I missed it. And I think it was more dealing with the Mesa and such citywide. But in the future, I think we've got a lot of good things to offer. Obviously, I can't specifically state those in 2 minutes, but just by the nature of how staff wrote this, to take into account the nature and zoning of the area within which the noise, music, or related sound emanates, whether the noise, music, or related sound is produced by a commercial or non-commercial activity. I'm cherry-picking off this, admittedly, but I think that just points to what we can do. There's very concerned and responsible businesses. These are our livelihoods. We have families. We've lived here years, and we have a lot of, I think I did an informal little poll. We have about 1 million visitors a year who frequent 20 establishments within a 3-block area. Now, that might be a problem to some, and we admit there are some problems, but it's also a big draw for the city of Santa Barbara, which is underrated. And there is a good neighbor policy, which the Entertainment Commission in San Francisco, it's a group of business people got together, and they act as, I guess, an interim, or if there's a problem with a neighbor, then those folks can go ahead and be called upon to try to implement a good neighbor policy. I have a couple.
You'll need to wrap up. I'm sorry, you're out of time, Bob.
Got it.
Thank you.
Do you want this?
Tamara Erickson, to be followed by Debbie Wright.
Good afternoon, Tamara Erickson, Hotel Santa Barbara. It sounds like you've done a lot of work for a lot of time. I want to congratulate you, but also encourage you, don't give up yet. Please don't stop. Just to to tag on what Bob was saying, there are real issues downtown with noise. Bob and I agree on a lot of things, and some things we don't. And I have just a real interest in making sure that, as some have said, existing businesses aren't impacted by new businesses, and hotels are obviously really impacted by noise. There are quite a few noise-producing businesses in our small area that the city has permitted, and I just want you to keep in mind, as you are lobbied by different entities about the downtown noise ordinances, I'm outnumbered, but I do represent hundreds of thousands of guests who come to Santa Barbara yearly and pay TOT, who also deserve a good night's sleep. And I know you keep those things in mind, but I look forward to the next process and just urge you to finish strong and also to really incorporate enforcement into the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Wright, to be followed by Glen Gibbons.
Hi, I've lived for 26 years in one of the neighborhoods adjacent to Ealing's Park. And I'd like you to look at the EIR presented back in, I think, 2008 for the Ealing's Park development, where about 40 families got together and we just gave feedback at the city council meeting at that time describing the noise disturbances we experienced due to Godric Grove events at Ealing's. There's been some improvement, but we continue to experience amplified sound on all days of the week until 10 p.m. And so a lot of it is accompanied by screaming, which can't be controlled or monitored by anybody's decibel meter. And so we consider this a disturbance. Regarding the current proposals, my neighbors and I would like the noise disturbance language improved so that the lower levels are not limited to 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's not working for us. We believe that the city should implement an ordinance that parks that are directly adjacent to neighborhoods should be asked to cease amplified sound and music at dusk, like other places do, like SLO, like Ventura County. You can't have anything amplified after dusk. We'd like to be able to sleep with our windows open, especially during this heat that we've been having the past couple years. And also, in addition to what Kathy said, I do want to point out that in Ventura County, an unlawful noise is described as an unusual noise which disturbs the peace or quiet of any neighborhood or which causes discomfort or annoyance to any reasonable person of ordinary or normal sensitivity residing in the area. And I think you have to take that into consideration, as Mr. Sweeney said. We've got these funny hills here. Thank you.
Thank you. Glen Gibbons, to be followed by Ken Albinger.
Committee members, my name is Glen Gibbons, and I'm a neighbor of Debbie's in Bel Air Knolls. I'm here in my representative capacity as a member of the Bel Air Knolls Civic Association. We do not support the ordinance as drafted. We consider there being a glaring error with the ordinance not including specifically Ellings Park. Last year, we did a survey of our community regarding Ellings Park, and for a significant number of the residents of our community, that is about 200 households, there are people that are really disturbed by the noise coming from Godric Grove. This ordinance would go, I think, a long way towards improving that. Ellings Park should be included. We have members of our community that have lived here from the inception of Ellings Park when it was, I believe, Las Positas Park, and they recall when there was a stricture that there was to be no amplified sound, and they have experienced over the many years and watched and had to suffer through increased amplified noise emanating from the park, to the extent that in the case of some members of our community, they have to, they can't even watch a movie in the evening with their kids. They have to shut the sliding glass doors, and they're, in some cases, all the way over on the other side of our community. So, in conclusion, Bel Air Knolls Civic Association wants to see this ordinance apply to Ellings Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Albinger, to be followed by Sonia Rosenbaum.
Chairman Rouse, members of the council, Ken Opplinger from the Chamber of Commerce. First of all, I want to thank you for taking a look at this and for directing staff to, I think, put a lot of time and effort into trying to come up with a more reasonable approach to this. We were pleased to meet with staff and provide our feedback, which was taken into account. Especially pleased that we are moving away from sort of this quantitative decibel level and towards, I think, something that's going to be a lot better for our community, where we can work together to try and address the sounds that are causing problems for people. And this is something that we're seeing in a lot of communities across the country. It's not unique to Santa Barbara that we're moving away from that measurement. I do just want to add in, though, that the idea behind this is to address some of the issues that we're having in neighborhoods, specifically around City College. We had, in our conversations with staff, I think, a fairly broad discussion about how this is going to apply to businesses, especially in the downtown area. And I would say that while we're supportive of the ordinance and we're asking you to approve it, we do still have some concerns about how we're going to take that into account. And I think that as we look at this, there's got to be some constructive ways that we can work together to address those instances, especially in some of the entertainment areas where we do have those noise issues going on. I think the ordinance allows us to do that, and so I'm optimistic, but I think it's something we need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Sonia Rosenbaum, to be followed by our last speaker, will be Janet Gregory.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and members. I'm Sonia Rosenbaum. I'm a new resident at 18 West Victoria Street, the condominiums next to Public Market, pretty much across from Soho Club. I'm urging you to please consider downtown noise, specifically nightclub noise. I'm also on the board of the association in our 37 units. Also, I should add, with the new building going up on the Arlington complex behind the Arlington, we have more residents there now, and it's impossible to have windows open, to not be bothered by the noise of the Soho Club every night when there's a performance. The windows can be closed, very strong insulating materials that the building is made with. It doesn't matter. We can hear in the hallways, we can hear almost every word of announcements and spoken sound from the club. So I just urge you on behalf of me and my fellow residents to please consider the noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges has a question.
If I might ask you, have you ever spoken with the people at the Soho Club?
No, sir. I'm a new owner here. I've only been here a few months, and I'm happy to do it. Partly I need an education of what is allowed, which is why I turned to the city website in terms of noise regulations and the decibel levels and all this, and I will certainly undertake that on behalf of me and my board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the final speaker will be Janet Gregory.
Hello, I'm a student at Santa Barbara City College, and so I have visibility of some of these issues, and I support this noise ordinance. Have a suggestion to hold the students accountable academically. But a second thing is I'm an Uber driver, and many of the kids that go up to these parties come from the International Language School down the hill. It's not just Santa Barbara City College students. And then I also am hoping that we can put something significant in the ordinance about the sound levels for the noise beepers and industry noise. I've written this email that you can see the details. Cemex is the cement company there off of Cesar Chavez, and they run operations 24/7 whenever they want. I've gotten some cooperation from them. They did change out some of their higher pitch beepers to little twerp directional beepers, but they can be heard at the harbor, on the mesa, up on the Riviera. These beepers are insidious. In fact, while we were waiting for this meeting to start, there was a beeper across the street. And the problem with those antiquated beepers is they elicit the adrenaline response, where we have the fight or flight response. And we don't respond consciously, but when we suppress it, it makes it so that it's null. And we have what they call a cry wolf syndrome, where people hear the beepers and they ignore it and will walk right behind a vehicle and get killed or injured. So it's a very unsafe thing to have these old beepers. And
I'll need you to wrap up, please.
okay.
You're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Before I bring it back to committee, first of all, I'd like to thank especially all the neighbors. I know a lot of you put a lot of time, effort, and been very patient with this. Some of you went all the way to San Luis Obispo physically to go inspect what they do up there, and it was a good model I think we may desire to follow. So at this point, I'd like to bring us back to the committee. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, the ordinance would apply to a partying household in San Roque of adults, right? We're not just talking about student households near the City College.
Chair Rouse, Committee Member Murillo, that's correct. It's not restricted to any particular neighborhood. It's citywide.
Okay. And I know that some of the students are UCSB students or foreign language students and City College students living in the target area, I guess, that we're talking about. So just to make that clear. And then what has bubbled to the surface, no one mentioned leaf blowers, and I spent an hour today looking at that, and I would really like to address that going into 2016. We had a police officer, Officer Reyes, who had a plan of action. So anyway, I'm looking into that. But Earl Warren Showgrounds, I hear you. I'm happy to talk to some of their board members whom I know. I mean, let me get it out of the way. Yes, I support the ordinance. I had never heard a complaint about the Eagle Lodge until this time. And I contacted a friend of mine who's on their board, and we're putting together a meeting of the Eagle Lodge leadership and the neighbors. So I hope that can get somewhere in terms of controlling their noise. If there's drug dealing and urinating, no way. I'm glad we have the police department represented here to hear that some of that apparently is going on or may be going on. Ealings, I've been contacted by people who want to do a whole separate process, just like we did with the task force around City College. Maybe we need a year of talking and figuring out what's going on there. I'd like someone from Bel Air Knolls to invite me to their house. I want to hear what you're hearing, because I live in the lowlands, and I'm not sure, but I believe you that there's noise coming out of Ealings. So I stand ready to attack or work on some of these other problems: Ealings, downtown, Eagles, and Earl Warren Showground, and leaf blowers. But otherwise, I stand ready to move this forward to City College, Mr. Chair. Move it forward to City Council.
Okay, those guys.
I'm not going back to school. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Would a logical way to proceed on this be to pass this, but bring it back to the ordinance committee with more staff input regarding the specifics that were brought up here? Because these do seem all legitimate points.
Councilmember Hotchkiss, we could certainly report back on some of it. My concern would be that the council gave us relatively specific direction about what to attack, and I'm not sure how comfortable your committee would be with expanding the scope without checking in with your colleagues. So we could come back, if you're talking about things like the Earl Warren Showgrounds, Eagles Lodge, downtown leaf blowers.
Right.
We could come back with some information, but I do feel constrained by the lack of broader policy direction from your colleagues.
Well, but the college is different than our downtown business corridor, and there are problems there that we have not solved. Can we not look into those more so that we can include those and get, rather than one size fits all, something that's sometimes specific to an area that needs particular attention?
Well, of course you can. I'm suggesting that you check in with your colleagues before expanding the scope of the project.
All right. I'm checking in.
Okay, well, yeah, and I have a suggestion to that end. I do think that we were given marching orders to specifically address the neighborhood issues that the neighborhood happens to all be here today, as a matter of fact. And then we should see if council wants to solicit our direction, or give us direction, to give staff direction to go forward on some of these other issues going forward. As you said, I've got them listed. I've certainly heard one-on-one from many of the folks, and I think there is another bite of the apple coming up somewhere. But for right now, I think our direction is to look at this in a narrower scope and try to go forward so we can implement an ordinance that we can develop, hopefully the SNAP program, to get going on this get this established. We were going to bifurcate our efforts to try to get this done this way first, and then address the larger issue if council directs us to do so
Okay.
in the future meeting.
Well, I would argue that the council did, but for sure to move forward with this. And therefore, I'll make a motion that we do exactly that.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you once again for showing up in the middle of the day and letting us know exactly what we should be doing. We're adjourned.